Snow fell softly over Denver International Airport that morning, coating the runways in a quiet, ghostly white. Inside Terminal B, Officer Elijah Grant walked his golden Labrador, Marley, through the early bustle. What began as a routine patrol would soon unravel into something far more chilling because Marley, the gentlest dog on the force, was about to stop a man from boarding a plane, and in doing so, save hundreds of lives. Before we begin, take a second to tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from today? We'd love to hear where our canine hero's story is reaching hearts around the globe. Denver, Colorado. January's breath clung to the glass panes of Denver International Airport, casting a fog across the bustling terminal. Outside, thick snow drifted down in hushed curtains, softening the airport's sharp metallic outlines with a powdery white calm. The storm had swept in overnight, leaving behind a bone-deep chill that found its way through doors and cuffs, a reminder that nature still ruled even here, amidst steel and jet engines. Sergeant Elijah Grant moved steadily through Terminal B, boots firm on the polished floor, the rubber soles clicking in a rhythmic beat that Marley, his canine partner, matched with effortless grace. At 38, Elijah was tall, with an athletic frame molded by a decade in military policing and 5 years now in airport security. His hair was kept short, dark, with just a trace of silver creeping at the temples, and his gaze was sharp-piercing even when he smiled, though he rarely did these days. After losing his younger brother in an overseas bombing, Elijah had learned to bottle emotion behind protocol. His calm exterior often made him seem detached, but it was discipline learned, practiced, necessary. Beside him trotted Marley, a 4-year-old yellow Labrador with soft amber eyes and a thick coat the color of warm sand. He was lean, strong, with a demeanor that leaned more toward empathy than aggression. Unlike many nines that barked, growled, or lunged, Marley rarely made a sound. His tail wagged slowly, almost politely. Other officers used to joke he was more therapy dog than security unit. But Elijah had seen Marley's quiet instincts uncover a concealed firearm in a stroller's lining, and once, a missing child in the chaos of a holiday rush-curled under a bench, found only because Marley had refused to leave that spot. As they passed Gate B14, Marley paused near the security corridor reserved for airline personnel. Elijah didn't think much of it at first. Marley was known to check cleaning carts and empty snack bags with near-religious curiosity, but this pause felt different. The dog's tail stiffened. His head lifted slightly, nostrils twitching, ears tilting toward the far end of the corridor. Elijah followed his gaze. Approaching them was a man in a navy blue jumpsuit, carrying a slim black case in one hand and scanning a keycard with the other. He looked to be in his early 40s, clean-shaven, sandy hair neatly combed to the side, face pale with a certain forced confidence. His name badge read, Owen Blake, Avionics Systems Technician. Elijah had never met him, but knew the type-quiet techs who kept the planes running behind the scenes, rarely drawing attention. Blake noticed them and offered a nod, not stopping as he passed. But Marley moved, not with a bark, not with a leap, just one step forward, placing himself directly in front of Blake's path. Elijah blinked. "Marley," he said firmly. But Marley didn't move. His posture remained composed, head slightly low, eyes locked on Blake like he was listening to something deeper than sound. Blake paused, smile faltering. "Something wrong?" His voice was even, but his fingers clutched the handle of the case just a bit tighter. "Not sure yet," Elijah replied, watching Marley. "He usually doesn't do this. I've been working here for 6 years," Blake said, glancing at his watch. "I'm late to calibrate the nav systems on Flight 317. This is a misunderstanding." Marley let out a soft whine, barely audible, but for Elijah, it was as loud as a siren. The dog's paw moved forward, just one, as if blocking Blake's left foot from advancing. "I'm going to have to ask you to wait here for a moment," Elijah said. Blake's jaw tensed. "You're stopping me based on a dog's reaction?" Elijah kept his tone neutral. "He's a federally certified detection canine. If he signals, I pause." Blake sighed, clearly trying to suppress irritation. "I don't have time for this." "Elijah?" A new voice joined them, Officer Regina Holt, a stocky woman in her 50s with cropped silver hair and the kind of voice that cut through airport noise like a radio crackle. She approached briskly, her hand on the radio clipped to her shoulder. "What's going on?" "Marley's got a fix on this technician," Elijah said. Not aggressive, but insistent. Regina squinted at Blake. "Avionics? He on the roster today?" "He says he is." Elijah gave a nod toward the badge. Regina tapped her device. "I'll check with maintenance ops. In the meantime, let's get him and that case into secondary screening." "I have urgent work to do," Blake started, but Elijah cut in gently. "If you're clean, this'll take 5 minutes. If not, well, Marley hasn't been wrong yet." Blake didn't answer, but Elijah noted something a flicker behind the man's eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but calculation. He'd seen it in interrogations before. Not, "I've done something wrong," but, "Can I still control the outcome?" As Officer Holt guided Blake toward the secured screening room, Elijah knelt beside Marley. The dog looked up, tail still, and eyes wide with quiet focus. "Good work," Elijah whispered, giving his ear a quick scratch. "Let's see what you just stopped." And as they watched Blake's figure vanish through the secondary door, Elijah felt something cold settle in his chest, something far colder than the January snow outside. Inside the secondary screening room, the air was sterile and cold, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lighting that cast sharp shadows beneath the metal table. The walls were blank, save for a digital clock ticking above the doorway. Sergeant Elijah Grant stood just inside, arms folded across his tactical vest, his expression unreadable as he watched Owen Blake sit across from him. Blake had removed his navy jacket, now folded neatly on the table. His white undershirt clung slightly to his back, where the heat of tension met the chill of the room. He sat with an outward calm, shoulders relaxed, hands loosely folded in his lappet. Elijah noticed the subtle signs, the micro movements of his left thumb, the barely perceptible twitch in his jaw when the door clicked shut. Officer Regina Holt stood near the corner, typing into a tablet. She had confirmed that Blake was scheduled for maintenance that day, but something still didn't sit right. No priors, clean background, cleared 5 years ago, renewed certification last November, she said, eyes still on the screen. "He was nervous," Elijah replied, nodding toward Marley, who waited outside with another officer. "But not nervous like first time on the job nervous. This was calculated. The kind you see when someone knows they're being watched and thinks they can beat it." Blake leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "I've been compliant. I've followed every step. I haven't raised my voice. And now, I'd like to know the basis for this delay." The door opened, and in walked TSA agent Marcus Calloway, a slim man in his early 40s with dark skin and close-cropped hair. His crisp uniform and spotless clipboard gave away his obsession with procedure. He was known for never laughing on duty and for inspecting every zipper like it was a potential threat. "I'll take it from here," Marcus said, giving Elijah a brief nod. "Mr. Blake, we're conducting a technical inspection of your tools and attire. You'll be asked to cooperate fully. If there's anything unconventional in your possession, now's the time to disclose it." Blake didn't flinch. "There's nothing unconventional." Calloway examined the slim black case Blake had carried. It contained the usual: a voltage meter, a fiber optic camera, small screwdrivers, and 2 sealed packs of compressed wipes for cleaning terminals. Elijah watched closely. Calloway's methodical hands moved from tool to tool, examining each with precise, practiced movements. Next came Blake's boots removed, scanned, swabbed. His watch, belt buckle, and even his ID badge were checked. Nothing set off alarms. But Elijah wasn't convinced. He remembered something from 3 years ago, in his first week working canine security with Marley. A similar search had turned up nothing until Marley had refused to leave a storage cabinet. Hidden inside had been a bag of components that, when assembled, could disable communications on an entire aircraft. Marley had waited patiently, tail still, eyes sharp, just like this morning. Calloway moved to Blake's jacket, running gloved fingers along the seams. "Standard airline, issued material," he murmured. "Doesn't appear modified." "I've had that jacket for 4 years," Blake said flatly. "It's been through every scanner, every inspection." Elijah stepped forward. "I want to bring Marley in." Calloway hesitated. "We've already done chemical swabs." "And Marley's nose works faster than any swab," Elijah said. He flagged him for a reason. After a moment's pause, Calloway gave a tight nod. Elijah stepped out to retrieve his partner. Marley stood waiting near the wall, tail still, eyes alert. At the sound of Elijah's voice, he rose and followed, boots clicking softly on tile. He entered the room with a quiet focus, ignoring the people, ignoring the table moving straight toward the chair where Blake sat. Blake shifted slightly. Just a flicker. Enough for Elijah to notice. Marley moved the jacket on the table and sniffed carefully along the sleeves, the pockets. Then, he paused at the collar. His nose lingered. A low, barely audible sound rumbled from his throat. Not aggression warning. Calloway narrowed his eyes. "You said nothing unconventional, Mr. Blake." "I meant it," Blake said, his tone sharpening. "If there's something there, I didn't put it." Marley stepped back. His tail dropped slightly. Then he looked at Elijah. It was a look the sergeant had learned to read in hundreds of field hours. Not threat, but persistence. Regina leaned toward Elijah and whispered, "I'm calling Airport Security Command, just in case." As she stepped out, the door swung closed with a soft thud. Blake sighed and leaned back. "This is ridiculous." "You know," Elijah said, his voice calm, "most people, when held up like this, get frustrated. Some lash out, but you're quiet, too quiet." Blake didn't reply. A moment later, the intercom buzzed. "We've got gate agents calling in," a voice said over the speaker. "Flight 317's crew is asking why their avionics tech hasn't reported to the aircraft." Calloway pressed the button. "Advise them that their technician is undergoing secondary clearance. Have them stand by." Elijah watched Blake closely. There was no twitch this time, no flicker, just silence. Then, softly, Blake spoke. "You don't know what you're getting involved in." Calloway straightened. "Was that a threat, Mr. Blake?" Blake exhaled, then looked up at Elijah. "No, it's a warning." Marley growled low again. He moved back toward the jacket. This time, he placed a paw gently on the inside seam just below the chest pocket. Elijah nodded to Calloway. "Cut it open." "You're serious?" Calloway said. "There's nothing visible." "Cut it open." With precision, Calloway took a blade and slit along the inside seam. At first, nothing. Thina sounded like a stiff crinkle. Inside the padding, he drew out a paper-thin component, flexible, metallic, with tiny copper tracings. "What the hell is that?" Calloway muttered. Blake went pale. "That," Elijah said, "is why we listen to the dog." The storm outside had thickened into a steady curtain of white as emergency lights flickered against the snowy backdrop of Denver International Airport's tarmac. Inside Hangar 4B, the technical team from the airport's Emergency Avionics Division had gathered around Flight 317, Boeing 737, prepped for a mid-morning departure to Boston. The plane stood eerily silent in the bay, its metal skin glinting under high-powered lamps, while engineers crawled over her fuselage like ants, searching for anything that shouldn't be there. Leading the inspection was Raymond Ray Folsom, a weathered man in his early 60s with a thick gray beard and piercing blue eyes. Ray had been in aircraft systems longer than most of the younger techs had been alive. His hands bore decades of grime etched into the knuckles, and a permanent stoop haunted his posture from years bent over access panels. Ray didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. His reputation came from a near-obsessive attention to detail born from personal loss. 20 years ago, Ray's wife and daughter had died in an airline crash caused by faulty wiring, something that haunted every inspection he performed since. "Marley signaled near the nav control console front panel," said Elijah, pointing toward the sealed bulkhead below the cockpit. Marley, his golden coat now damp from the snow, sat silently nearby with Officer Regina Holt, his breath misting in the cold hangar air. His eyes never strayed from the plane. "Then that's where we start," Ray replied, tapping his flashlight against the access hatch. He turned to his assistant, a young Hispanic technician named Miguel Trejochor, agile, with dark curls and nervous energy. Miguel idolized Ray, often mimicking his every move, though he still lacked his mentor's steady hands. Together, they unfastened the screws and opened the lower circuit panel. Inside lay a complex array of processors, copper coils, and color-coded wires exactly as expected. But Ray wasn't interested in what should be there. He was searching for what shouldn't. Miguel held up a handheld scanner, sweeping it over the system. No anomalies, no metal shifts, no signal leakage. Ray squinted. "That doesn't mean anything. We're not dealing with amateurs." Carefully, he pried back a shielding plate, revealing the nav interface board. His eyes narrowed. One of the micro-solder joints, barely the size of a freckle, had a different hue. "Hand me the scope." Under magnification, the solder revealed a tiny embedded component with wafer-thin leads tracing back into the board's inner layers. It had no serial number, no part code, no manufacturer's stamp. Ray had never seen anything like it. "Get me a forensic kit," he muttered. Elijah leaned closer. "Is it a transmitter?" Ray shook his head. "It's not sending, it's listening." Elijah's stomach turned. "Trigger?" "Possibly," Ray said. "Something that responds to a remote signal, maybe altitude-based activation, or a proximity code. But it was meant to blend in. You wouldn't spot this without purposefully looking for it." Back inside the airport's medical bay, Owen Blake lay strapped to a gurney, pale and unconscious. The overdose from the crushed capsule had sent him into cardiac arrhythmia, but fast action from the on-site EMTs had kept him alive. Now he rested beneath the glare of halogen lights, his heartbeat steady but faint on the monitor beside him. Overseeing the situation was Dr. Lauren Merrick, the airport's trauma response physician. She was in her late 40s, African-American, with keen hazel eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses and a voice that carried authority even when whispered. Her white coat flowed like a cape as she moved between monitors, checking readings with calm efficiency. Once, Lauren had been a battlefield surgeon in Afghanistan until a roadside bomb ended her final deployment. She walked with a slight limp now, but she'd never lost the hardened instincts of combat medicine. "He's stable," she told Officer Regina Holt, who stood watching just outside the ICU door. "But whatever he took was designed to act fast. That wasn't fear. That was a failsafe." Holt folded her arms, worry creasing her brow. "So he knew he wouldn't walk out of here. Or someone knew," Lauren said grimly. "We'll know more once he wakes if he wakes." Down the hallway, Marley lay curled outside the bay doors, unmoving but alert. His eyes remained fixed on the steel double doors of the trauma room, ears twitching with every sound inside. Elijah approached, kneeling beside him. "You did good, boy," he whispered, rubbing behind one ear. "But I think this is bigger than we imagined." Behind him, the hallway lights flickered. Then came the buzz of a secured line being activated. Regina answered it, her voice quiet but urgent. "Halt here." A pause, then her eyes widened. "You're sure?" She turned to Elijah. "FBI's already here." Blake's fingerprint hit a flagged biometric match. Alias, real name's Eric Sloan. CIA classified him as a dormant asset 5 years ago. He's been off the grid since. She exhaled slowly. "We're not just dealing with sabotage. This could be a coordinated breach." Elijah felt the weight of the revelation settle into his chest like ice. He looked down at Marley, who was watching him intently. The dog didn't move. He didn't need to. They both knew something terrible had nearly taken flight today, and they were just scraping the surface. The night had dropped like a hammer over Denver, swallowing the snow-covered tarmac in icy darkness. Floodlights bathed isolated corners of the airport grounds in artificial daylight, their beams cutting through the flurries like spotlights on a stage. In a service corridor far from the passenger terminals, a convoy of unmarked black SUVs rolled to a stop near a cluster of nondescript maintenance buildings. Tactical boots hit the ground, silent and deliberate, as the team prepared to breach. Inside one of the vehicles, Sergeant Elijah Grant checked over his gear. His Glock was holstered, his vest tight, but his attention remained fixed on Marley, who sat upright at his side, eyes scanning every movement with the precision of a hunter. Marley's coat had been brushed clean of snow, but his fur still held the faint chill of the night air. A ballistic vest marked Canine Unit DHS in bold black lettering covered his torso. His breath puffed out in short, silent clouds, steady and calm. Beside them sat Special Agent Valerie Keene, the FBI liaison now leading the operation. In her mid-30s, Valerie was tall and wiry, with auburn hair tied tightly into a bun and a face carved by years of fieldwork. She'd built her reputation tracking cyber-terrorists and radicalized domestic cells across 6 states. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her voice carried conviction and zero tolerance for disobedience. A long scar traced the underside of her right jaw souvenir from a failed arrest years ago that left one of her partners dead. Since then, she'd trusted instinct over orders. "Building 12C, Valerie said, pointing at the blueprints lit on the tablet in her lap. Maintenance records were falsified. No listed personnel. No official storage logs. Sloan's encrypted data pointed to this structure, and if the satellite map's right, it's got subterranean access." "How secure?" Elijah asked, clipping Marley's leash to his vest harness. "Unclear," Valerie said. "But if we're right, this is more than just a stash site. It's a hub." The radio crackled in Elijah's earpiece. "Command to all units. On my mark entry in T-minus 30 seconds. Marley's ears twitched as Elijah leaned down. "You ready, partner?" The Labrador gave one slow tail flick, his gaze unwavering. The team of 12 moved in coordinated silence, SWAT agents in dark gear flanking the entry while Elijah and Marley trailed with the lead team. The building looked harmless just. Another rusted-out service depot with cracked cement stairs and fogged-over windows. But as the breach command came, the door exploded inward in a burst of compressed air and shouts. "FBI! Hands where we can see them." Inside, they found a space deceptively ordinary. Steel shelves held containers marked as aviation cleaning supplies. A clock ticked on the far wall. A coffee pot sat cold in a corner. But Marley didn't hesitate. He pulled at the leash, not barking, not growling, just a firm, determined tug toward the back wall. "There's a panel here," Elijah called out, pointing to a vertical seam behind a supply rack. It was barely visible beneath a faded utility poster. As agents pried it open, a narrow stairwell was revealed, descending into what looked like a basement level that hadn't been listed in any blueprints. They moved quickly. The air below was colder, recycled, metallic. Marley led, nose working overtime, moving more rapidly now less cautious, more certain. At the bottom, they emerged into a dimly lit storage corridor. The hallway opened into a wide room, and that's when Elijah saw them. 15. 15 identical black cases lined the far wall, each one open, each housing the exact same micro-component design they'd recovered from the aircraft's circuit board. Not one had been armed yet. Agent Keen's voice was low and level. "This is a weapons cache. These aren't one-offs. These were meant for wide-scale deployment." Marley didn't stop. He pulled again, past the cases, toward a metal cabinet tucked behind an old maintenance desk. Elijah followed, heart thudding in his ears. When the cabinet was opened, they found a wall of paper files flight schedules, crew manifest for upcoming international routes, training credentials, and biometric templates for several technicians who weren't in any official system. A flash drive, duct-taped to the underside of a clipboard, was handed to Agent Keen. Her eyes scanned the labels. "These aren't just plans," she said. "These are assignments." A muffled noise from the stairwell behind them made everyone freeze. Elijah turned sharply, gun raised, but it was too late. From the stairwell emerged a man, no older than 35, lean with slicked-back blonde hair and gray mechanic's overalls. His jaw was tense, and his hands were up, but something about his expression set Elijah on edge calm. Too calm. He looked directly at Marley. "Beautiful dog," he said flatly. Shame he saw what he wasn't supposed to. "You're under arrest," Agent Keen called out, stepping forward. "Get down on the ground now." The man didn't resist. But as agents cuffed him, he gave Elijah a quiet smile. "It doesn't end here. You know that." Elijah didn't respond. He knelt by Marley, who stood between the man and the agents like a silent wall. Later, as evidence teams began cataloging every inch of the room, Elijah stood in silence, eyes on the line of black cases. What Marley had led them to was more than a threat, it was a campaign, one that hadn't even begun yet. But tonight, they had bought time, and Marley quiet, gentle Marley had stopped 15 bombs from ever seeing the sky. The snowfall had slowed to a gentle drift, blanketing the runways of Denver International Airport in a soft hush. 2 days had passed since the raid on Building 12C, and the entire airport still operating with a quiet reverence felt different. Security presence had doubled. Flights were delayed, not because of snow, but because every passenger, every bag, every breath of air felt like it carried a deeper weight. In Terminal B's administrative concourse, a small crowd had gathered for a ceremony that was never meant to exist. Rows of officers in crisp uniforms stood in formation, while behind them a handful of TSA staff, FBI agents, and airport engineers looked on. Cameras flashed from the back, and near the front, a podium had been set, flanked by 2 flag-sewn American, the other bearing the Homeland Security seal. Sergeant Elijah Grant stood to the side of the podium, dressed in full dress blues for the first time since his father's funeral 10 years earlier. His boots were polished, his back straight, but his eyes, usually sharp, scanning, were softer now, not tired, but reflective. At his side sat Marley, fur-brushed and clean, his 9 vest replaced with a sleek, navy blue harness embroidered with gold trim. Service, Hero Unit, a silver medallion had been clipped near his collar, glinting in the overhead lights. Airport Security Director Margaret Chen stepped up to the podium. In her late 50s, with close-cropped black hair and rimless glasses, Margaret was a former Coast Guard officer turned civil aviation strategist. Calm and articulate, she was known for running Denver's airport like a warship efficient, tightly monitored, and never unprepared. But even she had been rattled by what they'd uncovered. She spoke with measured grace. 2 days ago, thanks to the diligence of our officers and the remarkable instinct of one extraordinary canine, We averted a catastrophe. 15 devices, 15 flights, hundreds of lives. And it all started because one dog refused to let someone pass. Marley sat still, eyes alert, his gaze scanning the crowd just as he had the terminals. He didn't seem to understand the clapping or the sea of smiles pointed at him. But when Elijah knelt and placed a hand on his back, the Labrador leaned gently into the touch. Chen reached for a small velvet box held by Agent Valerie Keene, who stood in full black suit to one side. Valerie hadn't changed much since the raid, still taut with alertness, still scanning doorways, still haunted by the words of the man they'd arrested. It doesn't end here, but for today, she stood silently, a rare expression of peace softening the sharp angles of her face. Chen opened the box and drew out a circular medal engraved with the Department of Homeland Security insignia. On the back, the words, "For unwavering loyalty in the face of hidden threat." She clipped the medal onto Marley's harness with surprising gentleness. "Marley, on behalf of this airport, this agency, and the countless passengers you've protected, thank you." Applause erupted. Elijah didn't move. He just stared at his partner, the dog that no one had wanted at first, the one dismissed during training as too slow, too gentle. He remembered the first time they met at the DHS canine facility in Texas. Marley had been quiet, cautious, trailing behind the others, refusing to leap into commands like the German Shepherds or Belgian Malinois. But he'd also been the one to sit silently in front of an equipment locker no one had flagged until trainers discovered a disassembled radio jammer inside. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned. A few officers came by to pat Marley or shake Elijah's hand. Agent Keene walked over, offering Elijah a manila folder. Intel from Sloan's hard drive. Still being decrypted, but it's expansive. She paused. "You were right to trust him." Elijah nodded. "He doesn't look for threats. He feels them." "I hope," Keene said quietly, "we keep listening." Margaret Chen approached them, her voice lower now, no longer for public announcement. "Homeland Security's Aviation Division has requested you and Marley for consultation work. Training other teams, running drills. They're calling it instinct-based screening protocol." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Sounds fancy for listen to your dog." Chen smiled faintly. Sometimes the simplest truths take the longest to recognize. As the crowd finally dispersed, Elijah crouched beside Marley, who had settled near the terminal windows. Outside, planes taxied in the snow, a carousel of life continuing, as if nothing had happened. Elijah removed his gloves and pressed his forehead gently against Marley's. "You knew," he whispered. "You always know." Marley's tail gave a soft thump. His eyes turned not toward Elijah, but toward the terminal entrance, toward the steady stream of passengers walking in with suitcases and cell phones, unaware how close they'd come to never making it home. And in that moment, Elijah saw it. Marley wasn't looking for praise, for medals, or for ceremony. He was already watching the next threat. The dog's job wasn't done, and neither was Elijah's. Sometimes, the smallest voice in the room is the one we should listen to the most. Marley didn't speak. He didn't argue or explain. He simply refused to move, and in that stillness, he saved hundreds of lives. The lesson? Instinct isn't just a feeling. It's earned through trust, tested through time, and when honored, it can alter the course of fate. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Have you ever seen an animal sense danger before anyone else did? Or maybe you've known a pet whose loyalty changed your life. We read every story, and yours might just inspire someone else. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And remember, not all heroes wear capes. Some walk on 4 legs and wait quietly for you to listen.